Everybody, welcome to this issue of Staffing Monthly. I am excited to be digging into this topic today because it's something that I think is going to be utterly important as we move into 2023 and we start to move into this new phase of staffing. And the guy that I actually have here with me today is somebody that I'm shocked that we weren't well in each other's circles to begin with. And we happened to stumble across each other on LinkedIn, as most people in staffing do. But we actually stumbled upon each other with a really cool video feature in LinkedIn that we'll talk about in our story. But I'm actually here today with Kevin O'Brien of Echogravity, and they are a marketing company, not just any marketing company. They're like a world-renowned marketing company that focuses just on the staffing and recruiting space. So when I saw Kevin and what he was doing, and when I talked to him and learned about some of his approaches, I wanted to invite him on because I feel like what he does and what he knows about our industry can be helpful to you. So, Kevin, welcome to Staffing Monthly, and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for having me. It was interesting how we came across each other, and I'm glad to know you.
It was, man. And I want to jump into that quick story. I thought this was fun. And for people out there that aren't aware of this, I hope I'm not, hopefully you and I aren't the last two people to know about this, but you and I were chatting and exchanging messages on LinkedIn like a lot of people do. And all of a sudden you just asked like, hey, what's that video camera thing? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what it does. And we just gave it a go. And it's a pretty good video conferencing platform if you want to connect with people, right? Do you think the same thing?
Yeah, I found you because I was snooping on Matt Lazar on with Haley because I was
Yeah.
on the same panel as he was at TempNet, and I'm like, oh, I'll check out this video, and I thought you did a fantastic job of the interview, and it was a pretty insightful conversation, and we just had to be. We were on LinkedIn at the same time shooting chats back and forth, and there's that little video icon, and whatever, late on a Friday, we just happened to be sitting
Right.
there killing time. And there we are. Like, it was like a FaceTime video on LinkedIn. It worked out pretty well.
It was. And I would recommend anyone that's out there that's not noticed that or not tried that out yet. It's a cool feature. I found value in it. And honestly, as well as the job LinkedIn does with their app, I think I was on my desktop, you were on your mobile, I believe, or something device, and it was fine. I think it would be a great tool for any recruiter or a salesperson to use if you can connect with your prospect or candidate there. But I thought that was neat.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because like we were talking about that. It's like, okay, if you're recruiting someone and then you're chatting, like jumping into a video call might be kind of creepy. And so I don't know if I'm not recruiting, hey, are you available for a video? It's kind of weird, but it's interesting to see where that'll take off.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess thinking about it from that perspective, you never know the setting that somebody is in when they're actually messaging you back and forth on LinkedIn. So it might be, what's that website that was popular like a decade or more ago? Is like Chat Roulette or something where you basically just jumped on and then like it would just pair you up with like a video call with someone random from around the world, like, and you'd sometimes be shocked at what was on your screen. So hopefully it's not like that. Hopefully LinkedIn
Yeah.
can somehow. Yeesh. So yeah, so obviously we had a great conversation that day, and I got to know more about you and what you're doing, and that you're in the marketing space when it comes to staffing. And you said this thing to me that I loved. And you're probably like, oh God, what was it?
Here we go.
And it was the most honest, transparent thing that I think I've ever heard from anyone that owns a business. And I appreciated it. And I wanted to start our conversation here. And for those of you listening, it's going to be a really weird place to start our conversation today. But you basically said, I said, hey, well, what's going on with the future of marketing? And your response was, you know what? Nobody really knows. Nobody really has it completely figured out. And I was like, wow. So that's where I want to start today. So I don't have this big grandiose question like I normally ask. My question is what do you mean no one really, how can you be a marketing expert, world renowned, and your answer is no one really has it figured out? Like, what do you mean by that?
Wow, that's putting me on the spot. That's coming from a guy who's supposed to be running a marketing agency, right? Nobody has it figured out, which I'm supposed to have it figured out, I guess, right? Well,
But it's true. It's honest, right?
it is honest, and I think that I think it starts with there's so many things going on with the market right now. And it has to do with where we stand in the economy, how tech is playing into marketing, um, like where is content, how do people engage? There's just there's no silver bullet right now in what we do other than because things change all the time, whether it's all cyclical. Are we going after new clients? These staffing firms are either they need recs or they need people, and it's almost never in alignment. So we keep moving from, oh my gosh, we got a ton of candidates and we need new requirements, or we've got a ton of requirements and need new candidates. And so, there's a lot of, winner take all out there on the boards. Light industrial is dominated by Indeed. Tech is, there's a lot of different places there, and LinkedIn, and just connecting with people is so different than what it used to be. And so, even with TikTok coming in, there's a lot of buzz about that, but is it really a marketing play for this industry? I don't buy into it yet. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and figuring it out is just, it's the big equation that we need to figure out.
And that's why I appreciated your answer, because I feel like, just from my own observations, the world's moving fast, right? And marketing really has to keep up with how quickly the consumer moves. And there's a lot of different tools that they're being exposed to, like you said, TikTok, but then there's LinkedIn, which has been a staple, and Indeed's been a staple for a little while. Like, there's all these different things that play, and how people engage with those things will determine how we as the agency need to engage with the people. And it's moving fast. So I felt like it was a transparent answer that, like, we don't really have it figured out right now. But so you just said something about how we engage with people is drastically different. So let's level set that. So let's go back like 3 or 4 years, and what was the standard kind of playbook for how an agency would engage with people? And then what do you see as the biggest difference today?
Well, I'm not an expert here, but communications have changed in terms of, like, we do this video chat, and video calls, and I barely pick up my phone anymore. And I had a client conversation this morning, and she's like, we're trying to get into new markets, and how do we expand in those markets? And the sales teams, cold calling, in her opinion, is dead. So marketing is becoming more of this awareness, brand recognition. And so, nobody picks up their phone. I never pick up my phone unless I know who it is. So, COVID is a part of that. We never want to use that as an excuse, but it has changed in how we communicate. And candidates too. I mean, they're on their phone all the time. And, does email even work? My kid doesn't even know what an email address is. He's got one, but he doesn't check it. So in texting has even changed. Kids these days, use Snapchat for communication. And so the communication mechanisms are completely changing. And so getting in front of people has really been a challenge for a lot of clients that we work with. And you try new things, but and that's where, like an Indeed comes into play, because if they own the market on the jobs and where they're being posted, that's where all the traffic's going to be. And so it's especially for light industrial, but yeah, it's interesting.
So how do we change that? Because one of the things I've always been, I don't want to say scared of, but I guess cautious of, because I've been around the industry long enough to see it happen a couple times, is right now Indeed is the dominant player, and they had an amazing business model to get all of that traffic to where they're at, and they're big enough to basically tell Google, no, we don't need you for our traffic. Like, that's pretty amazing. But before Indeed, it was something else. It was Monster and Career Builder, who are still in the market, but just not as prominent. And before them, it was probably something else. So it's, if you put all of your efforts or resources into Indeed or Career Builder, eventually there's going to be an ebb and flow, and there's going to be something that replaces Indeed or takes out the number one spot for job boards in the market at some point. So, like, what's the strategy from your expert opinion? Like, should we be focused on just like trying to stay ahead of that curve and just be quick to move from one to one to one, or should we do something better to actually cultivate our own talent database? And I know we got ATSs, but like an actual community of talent that we keep buying from Indeed or these other job boards. Like, what's the right play there to stay ahead of it? I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in that
I know.
that one
Sorry, I
statement.
ramble a lot.
So let me try to unpack some. I may miss a few, but so my perspective on this is, we got to start with the data, and especially when we look at going after new platforms. You talk about trying new things, and I think every staffing firm that at least we work with is like, we don't want to spend more money on Indeed. We need a healthy mix of where we put our dollars. And unfortunately, if you're tracking all this information and data and you understand what cost per application is, which is the standard for measuring performance, which I disagree with that, by the way, but that's what we all use. If we're using that model, then we bring in ZipRecruiter or Dice or whatever we use, and we find that cost model isn't as effective as, let's say, an Indeed. Then what do? You want to diversify your portfolio of where you're getting your talent, but at the end of the day, you need people. So if one source is providing that the heavy lifting as far as all of your talent, then just for the sake of diversifying, do you really need to do that? And the other piece of this is, we talk about this a lot, is that you're a lot of staffing firms are paying for the same candidate over and over. And so getting towards a model where you can understand what percentage of your people you're getting are new versus already in your database can give you a sense of where how much, like there's this, it's very difficult to figure out, but at what point are you spending optimally to get the net new candidates versus the ones that you already have, and then using automation and everything else to nurture your database to bring those forward. So it's you need a lot of really good people around you that can play with the numbers. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a client that's got an amazing CFO that has put this model together that allows us to look at the data. And so it takes time and it's difficult, but that's my take on it.
So that's interesting. So I picked up on a pretty strong comment. So you disagree with the cost per applicant data point.
Yeah.
Why do you disagree? Why do you think that's not as important as it's touted to be?
Well, this is because, like clients look at us and say, what can you control from a marketing standpoint? And what we can control is cost per application. But at the end of the day, we get a candidate comes in and maybe applies to 4 positions. So, or they come in and we're paying for that candidate that's already in the database. And so as a marketing function, our job is to identify new talent pools or people and reach people that we don't already know about. And so I think the real metric that we should be looking at, there's 2. One is net new candidates. So when we look at, when you look at your ATS and you say, okay, over the course of the month, we added, 100 new candidates from our sources. That's truly the measure that we should be looking at, is how effective, like, are we writing jobs to attract new people? Are we, and some of it's out of our control, but if we have, let's say, 1,000 applications, but only 100 new people, are we being measured on 1,000 because 900 are already in our database? Or should we be nurturing those? Another way to measure that is how many people are we bringing forward that we're nurturing from our database that we already know about? Like, how can we get to them quicker so they're not applying on Indeed again because we already got them before? So it's a complex model, but I believe net new candidates is a measure that I would like to at least have us be accountable for with the clients that we're working at that level. And then the second metric is cost per start. Like, what does it really cost to start a candidate? Because then there's some quality metrics involved there, but those are the two things that I look at on a pretty regular basis. But cost per application, I guess, is industry standard, so that's what we've been using.
But I think that, I mean, I think so. I like your logic a lot there, and there's a couple of things I want to dig into, but I do agree with that. I think the cost per application is the low hanging fruit for the job boards and marketers that aren't as integrated into their client's process. It's the easiest data point to get, and it measures against a large volume, and if you think about it, net new candidates only plays against a marketing company because it's like, oh, well, I got you 1,000 people. It's a lot cooler to say I found you 1,000 people or I drove 1,000 people to your website than it is to say, well, I got you 100 new people, but I charged you to get 900 people that you already had in your database.
Mm-hmm.
But in all fairness, and this is something I want to dig into that you said, is that if you're an agency and you work with a marketing company and you're paying them, it doesn't matter if it's Indeed or whatever, but if you're paying to drive 900 people to your website that you already have sitting in your database, shame on you, right? I mean, that means you're not doing the best job managing your database. And so you said this statement, you said agencies, how you said, how can we do a better job getting to the candidates, bringing the candidates that are in our database to the forefront sooner, making them aware of our jobs sooner before they go out and apply for it on Indeed. So do you see that often? Do you think there's a lot of agencies out there that are just not cultivating their own applicant tracking system or cultivating their own database?
I do. I think some of it has to do with recruiter processes and what they've been used to. And, a lot of recruiters these days are not recruiters, they're order takers. And they're looking for that net new candidate. And, it's not uncommon where, we'll talk to recruiters and they'll say, well, we just posted this job, but we're waiting to see what new applicants come in. And so, maybe their workload of too many jobs, and they're not really digging into the database. And so some of it I think is recruiter performance optimization, and then the other part of it is automation and working with some of the tech that's out there, because it's not easy, but it's not hard. It's difficult to really map out how you want these process flows to go. And it takes some time and a lot of heavy thinking around a lot of processes within your organization. And so if you can get that down and have that map put in place to get to the candidates at the right time that you've already paid for, and bringing them forward with the right communications, using the right, I mean, a lot of these, especially on the light industrial side, they're changing phone numbers all the time. So you may not be able to get to them. You may have to get them through new acquisition, but having a process to optimize and make sure that your database is bringing back, because that's the moment of truth, is the record of truth, is your ATS. So it's hard, but it's something that I think a lot of firms haven't caught on to yet. I mean, it's like, you think about, with Bullhorn, you've got the Bullhorn automation, formerly Here Fish. Yep. And Sense is kind of that other product for all the other platforms. And using these tools takes some time. They're expensive. You have to kind of know, somebody in your organization has to be able to figure it out and use it. And who is that? Is it the recruiting team? Is it operations? Is it, you have to somebody dedicated to that, or is it marketing? So I think we're still figuring this out as an industry a little bit. I think a lot of the bigger firms have access to these tools and have departments and people that are just specialized in automation. But some of those mid-tier firms and smaller firms don't really have the resources to get on that, and that's where they're left behind.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see it the same way too. I see those tools that they can be incredibly sophisticated and powerful, but the more sophisticated and powerful something is, tends to be the more costly and the more tricky it is to train and implement and get someone to own it within your agency. So the smaller mid-market and smaller, they definitely should find a way to optimize it so they can compete with the big ones, especially coming into potentially turbulent times. So my mind keeps going to this one thing. So I'm on the sales side a lot. And one of the big questions that salespeople often get when they're dealing with a new company is, why should I choose you? Why should I pick you over a competitor, right? That unique value proposition is what you call it in the business development world, right? So it's like, why should I choose you? And I feel like with the proliferation of like Indeed and job boards, most agencies have gone to just post and pray. Like they just post and then they filter that out. Like so I think if most agencies are just doing the same thing and they're kind of attracting the same candidates from job boards and stuff, like they lose that unique value proposition. So what is a way from a marketing perspective or for maybe how you work with your clients, what is a way to help your clients actually have a UVP so they have a better answer to that question about why they're different or why a client should choose to work with them? Any insight there?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I still think to some degree, a lot of it is relationship. There still is a relationship factor in this business, and so you're referring to whatever some manufacturing firm in some city that is deciding on who they should use in terms of their staffing partner, right? Is that
Yeah.
so? And I think a lot of it has to do with, at least what I see is having, whether it's an on-site person or a whoever's managing that relationship, being able to, vet the candidates and really own the relationship and own the brand that they're ultimately representing. I think over time, I've seen a lot of, unless they're big relationships where there are multiple people on site, or when you're trying to break an account, obviously you have to prove yourself. But as time moves along, having that stickiness, because there's especially in the light industrial side, there's a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
On the professional side, there's usually not as much, and the relationship there rings true as well. But the common denominator I see is that the relationship still matters. I think in how you approach the client and their business, and understanding and knowing their business ahead of time, and being able to talk intelligently to the market and to wages and things like that, which in this case, I think a lot of companies do bring forward that information. But it's dedicating your people and or dedicated resources to saying, we can fill these positions and these people are going to stick. You don't always have that control, but being able to vet those people out and really taking an ownership level is really where I see the clients that we work with, have success. Now, how to communicate that on the front end is sometimes very difficult, right? Everybody says and promises they can do things, but a lot of it is, just having a good presentation of what you're doing, and then backing that up with credentials. Referrals, references are always still a big piece of it, but I don't think there's a silver bullet there either.
Okay, that's fair. So what I want to do now with the remaining minutes that we have left, Kevin, is I want to really have you put your outsourced CMO hat on. I know with echogravity, you said really your focus with clients isn't so much of just a website provider or a copyright, person that does it. Like you really prefer to take that kind of almost outsourced CMO approach where you can actually bring that chief marketing officer expertise to the company you're working with. So thinking about that hat, I just want to start talking about very actionable tactics or tips that our viewers can take away from the conversion process, from attracting that net new person that's never heard of you, and getting them to your website and getting them to look at your jobs and getting them to apply to your jobs, just kind of the very top of the funnel there. So with that framework, what are some of the best things that agencies can be doing today just to get more traffic to their website, more new people being aware of who they are as a staffing agency?
Wow, that's a tough one. So, well, I go back to me, marketing and candidate acquisition, more so, at least for me, over the past 2 years, has been very data driven. And so, in marketing, as we tell our clients, it's a test. you test theories and you prove them, and then you dwindle them down into ones that are working, and then you continue to keep testing things. And so, for the clients that I'm heavily involved with, that's what we do. So we look at you have all these things that you're doing to acquire talent, and we're measured on, as a marketing organization, how many new candidates we're bringing in. And so what we've done is essentially, maybe you're running Google ads, you've got some things going on Facebook, you're using Indeed, you're using different boards. And what we've been doing is essentially, looking at those, the cost per new applicant. We look at the cost per, we do, I mean, for some degree, a cost of application, but we look at how many starts we're getting. Because when we go back to that question you asked about cost per application, we could be driving another thing that, it could be $2 an applicant in a certain market, and we're killing it as far as applications go, but we're getting 0 starts. So we look at the quality of the source. And so to some degree, I'd rather have fewer people at the top of the funnel if they're actually starting, right? So like a percentage of, like we have in certain clients, the website is being driven by organic traffic and by maybe some Google ads and things that are other lower cost sources, but our rate of applicant to start is much higher. So we may be bringing in 50% of our starts are non-paid sources. And so I don't want to drive a whole ton of, I can high five everybody around the office and say we brought in 2,000 candidates last month, but our starts were flat, right? That doesn't do anybody any good. So looking at the data and seeing where our starts coming from, because that's where the money's at, right? That's how we make money, is people start, people stay, we're getting the gross margin. And so it's continuing to these levers of what do we turn down, what do we turn up, where do we move budget, where do we take budget away, what tech is working. And so I have to push back. I've been accused of not answering the question and changing the question to the answer I want to give. And this is kind of what I'm doing here. Is it's not so much about how many applicants you're bringing in, but it's how many of those applicants that turn into starts. And I think that's more of an important metric to look at.
Okay. Well, that was a very nice way to say that, Dan, you should have asked a better question,
I don't know how you feel about that. You may be like,
No, I think you're right, actually. I think you're right. I think that would be a better question to ask than just how do you get more people looking at your website, because more people doesn't always mean more placements. So I think that's a fair answer. So, but let me tell you what I took out of it. And I think this is worth digging into, because I think this could be a gold nugget for a lot of people that are looking at this. So really, if an agency wants to improve their recruitment marketing spend, they have to focus on starts, and they should be tracking it by source. So every time you make a placement, you should verify that you have a source identified for that placement. So if they came from Facebook paid ad or Facebook organic or Indeed, or something along those lines, or CareerBuilder or Dice or wherever, or referral, like wherever, like you should track all of that. And then maybe monthly take a look at that data and say, hey, we see that 50% of our starts came from Indeed. So really, at least, around 50% of our recruitment dollars should go to Indeed. And you're basically saying almost that model, like track it to that level, review the data, and then determine based on that where you should invest your money to get more starts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like that model because, because you can say half my budget goes to Indeed, but 30% of my starts come from Indeed. So there's something off there, right? Like, and then looking at, because, there's places where we've used ZipRecruiter and we put a budget on there. And the cost per start for a ZipRecruiter candidate was $150, but the Indeed start was 60. So why would I continue to put in the cost per application? In this case, makes no difference to me, because it's about what's the total cost to start a candidate, and are we getting the commensurate level of starts from that spend? And so, that's a different way to look at it, because I talk to other people in the market, in the industry, and they're like, yeah, our cost per application was low. But then I'm thinking, well, are you getting the starts out of it? So sure, we're driving down the applicant cost. We don't know, they can't answer how many of those applicants were already in the database. So I just think we need to look at the data differently, because at the end of the day, it's about gross margin and profit for our clients. And so how do you drive that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And actually, as you were talking, another kind of slicing of the data came to my mind is if you're going to track that level of source data, it's probably also a really good idea to track the type of role, and for overarching, strategic, was it a light industrial position or a clerical position? Because sometimes, you might get better light industrial candidates from an Indeed or a ZipRecruiter and not as good on clerical, just sake of argument. And if that's the case, then you really should be thinking maybe I shouldn't be posting all of my clerical positions on Indeed. And I know this is a lot of people don't get into the data like us guys, and we kind of geek out on it, but it's a good place to understand how do you track the performance of your marketing dollars, because that's the only way you're going to know how to effectively spend those dollars and increase your throughput in the future. So I think it's a good twist to look at the data differently. I think it's a good approach. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. And a lot of companies really they don't have that information. They're just, like you said, posting and praying, and they know they need to spend X amount of money, and they really don't know the results and the performance of that spend.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's that old adage, right? Like I know that half of my marketing spend works really well. The problem is I just don't know which half it is.
Right.
So,
Right.
and the thing is it doesn't need to be that way today, Kevin. Like there's so many ways to look at the data, so it's really just what it really takes is it takes a leader, a manager, an owner, somebody to say, I want to look here. I want to optimize my spend. I want to increase my performance. I'm willing to make the commitment to set this up the right way and train my people on how to, track the data the right way so we can actually make better informed decisions on where we're spending our money.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think that can circle back to that unique value proposition question that I asked. If someone says, "Why should I choose you?" Everyone posts from the job board the same way. You're right. It would be unwise for a staffing agency to not use job boards. We're always bringing in talent, but how you use those job boards are much different. And if you ask all my competitors what their efficacy or their yield rates are per job boards based on positions and starts and things like that, they're not going to have a clue because they're posting and praying on your behalf. If you ask me that question, I can give you a clear strategic and tactical picture of exactly how I'm going to spend my money to give you the best candidates that's going to stick. And if a client hears that, they're going to be like, oh, wow. And if they go ask the competitors and they say, hey, tell me what this is, and they're like, oh, I don't know what any of that is, they're going to seem incompetent and they're not going to seem like a good partner for that client. And they're more likely to choose you. So I think that looking at the data a different way and tracking it also went back and answered a prior question.
Yeah, it's a really complex problem. I mean, when you look at, especially since, like, again, light industrial is owned by Indeed for the most part. At least that's what I'm seeing in the markets that we're in. And putting the spend in the right place to get even viewed and get those applicants. So it's becoming more competitive on those sites, to be able to rank for the jobs to be seen, because the big guys, you can look in those analytics that Indeed gives you,
Yeah.
and you can see, like, your company may not even be on the top 10, and you're spending a lot of money just to get an application. And so, their philosophy is to spend more money on fewer jobs to get ranked so that you get those applicants, but it's going to cost you more to get those. And so it's very complex, to do it right and to do it well. And unfortunately, Indeed is the winner here.
They are, and they did a great job converting all of the job board traffic in the world out there over to them, and now they own it. And kudos to them. That was a brilliant business move on their part, but they're going through changes. They're changing the way that staffing agencies can enhance jobs, and they had a major impact on applicant flow. Two different times last year, there was like the February cliff that happened with Indeed, and then later in the year, I think September or so, maybe just recently, they made some of those changes. But so if that's the case, how do you, and this is my last question on this side of it, and then I've got kind of a closeout question for you, but how do you feel that like referral programs play in? If we want to focus on the relationship side of this, and all of the data out there suggests that a referred candidate is more likely to be placed and going to last longer on a placement. If all of that's out there, like how much should we be focusing on building up our own referral programs to get to drive candidates into our database as it balances against like job boards?
Yeah, no, I think it's funny you asked that because some of the strategies that we're trying to put in place are, referral programs. And I think it goes beyond just the tools and tech out there that is currently, and you're well aware of the different platforms available.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm pushing the boundaries of some of those platforms because I'm not seeing some of the results that we're expecting, and trying to push the tech a little further to be able to get that into play. But it's complex there too, because a lot of some people are willing, like 10 years ago, I think people were more willing to give referrals, and unless there's something in it for them now, we don't see those as prevalent, right? There has to be, what am I going to get out of this? Am I going to get a referral fee? Am I going to, does it benefit me to refer my friend or whoever? And then people get pinged so much on the stuff that they're like, they don't want the noise anymore. So it's hitting the people at the right time, at their journey, their candidate journey, where they're most likely to provide a referral. And we're working through that with certain clients and trying to optimize that. That's another thing. What does the data show? Are there certain sources where they're going to be like, is a referral going to be better to refer versus somebody we just picked off of the job board? So there's, again, I go back to the data here and try to find those best, like those highest candidates possibilities of giving a referral, and then hitting them at the exact right time to get that referral, and then tracking
Yeah.
it too, right?
And then tracking it.
Automating it is a big deal. We're trying to automate that so it just right back into the system. It comes back as a referral source tracked, and then we got to get on those candidates right away.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say, and track it as well, because you need to look at that. And that brings up, just to kind of close that point out, that I thought you said was a really smart insight, is that not only should you be looking at your kind of cost per start based on source, but all of your ATS should have data around duration of assignment, refill rates, conversion rates, all that stuff. And if you're tracking the source of every placement, the type of insights that you can gain, if you see that your placements are lasting twice as long, and this is a fictitious number, but twice as long from a referral versus Craigslist, right? Like that tells you something, about where you should be investing your money. If you see that your average gross margin from a source is a certain level, it tells you a better ROI metric. So I honestly think the best action item that we've taken out of this conversation, Kevin, is that just the viewers should get really granular on just tracking their placement source. The type of data and insights that you can glean just out of that alone can give you amazing information to make informed business decisions to guide you through the turbulent next 3 to 9 months, which is my closeout question. I'm asking everybody this right now.
Well, hold on. You make a good point on the,
Okay.
on
All right.
the, so that, like, part one of this is that getting the candidate and getting the source. But you touched on another piece that I think is vital, is that next, like the average margin per candidate per source. Like that is extremely valuable information, because on the surface, we may do our job and let's get the candidates in, and or clients or whatever. And we say, okay, we got to start, we got a new client, we did our job. But are those sticky? Is there certain sources, like you said, that are producing more gross margin? That's like the next level, at least, as I see it, that the data that's really going to prove certain things. And maybe there's a correlation, maybe there's not. But if you can make a correlation, then that can really, make a big difference in the business. So I'm just agreeing with you there.
Yeah, no, and the tools are out there. Like, if you're viewing this and you're thinking, man, this sounds like a really complicated project. So I'll do two things. One, reach out to me. Like I love setting that kind of stuff up for people. I'm a geek like that. I can help people capture data. But I talking to my friends at Aviante with Rishabh and what they're doing in their new business intelligence, the insights platform, it will do that. Like as long as you're training your people to input the source code on it, they will have the report that shows you, the GM per source and the assignment duration per source and convert so they are ahead of that. So there's some great tools out there to do that in the marketplace. And it's big. I mean, that's going to can make a huge difference on where you go with your agency. Um, but again, speaking where we go, got to ask this question, man.
Sure.
I don't expect you to have a crystal ball, but everyone's talking about this recession. Maybe we're in it, maybe we're not. Tom Erb said last month that 80% of economists think there's a 25% chance that we go through a recession. I don't know what that really means. So, what is your thought? Are we in a recession? Are we going to go to a recession? Are we not? Is it going to be bad? Like, what is your thought around this recession talk?
I'm probably the worst guy to ask about this because I think there's an opportunity, like the good firms are going to make it through regardless. And
Yeah,
it's a matter of, I think there's going to be some slowdown in different markets. Like we're seeing it already on some of the white, like the finance and accounting is getting hit a little bit. Healthcare is still strong, but it's slowing a little bit. And light industrial is still, strong. Companies still have needs to get product out. So, I think there's going to be something out there that we're going to have to think about. And I think the firms that aren't staged and haven't been selling through this cycle, like a lot of firms are focusing on the candidate acquisition piece, but the best time to sell is when the supply is low because people are willing to listen. And so, we've been preaching to our clients, you guys should be selling. Sure, you want more recruiters, you want to fill positions, but this is the time to make the relationships count. And so,
right.
because they're more than willing to listen, how can I get another partner in here to fill my job? So the companies that have been doing that are going to be, I think, staged really well to at least, whatever. There may be a few bumps here, but they're going to get through it. I don't think there's not going to be anything real deep here. The economy is still really strong despite what's going on. So that's my feedback.
Yeah. I think it's spot on. I know you said you're the worst guy to ask, but I think it was pretty intuitive. And I don't know if you look at the data like I do, but I think it was the Pulse report from SIA in August. They show the slowdown. Temporary staffing, light industrial, you're right, is pretty flat. Perm placements are dropping off. I think they're down, quite a bit, 14 or so percent month over month there. But so there is a little bit of a slowdown. Going back to something Tom Erd said last month that I thought was really smart, and I hadn't thought about this, but he's been doing this. He's been a top coach consultant for a long time. He compared this to the recession that we had in 2008, 9, 10. And he was like, if you remember, everything kind of crashed. And sadly, I do remember. He goes, but the demand for IT people was so much higher than the supply was that the demand came down, but it never actually dipped below the supply line, right? So that's why IT never really experienced the recession. They went flat, but they never declined. And I was like, that's fascinating. I go, why is that relevant today? And he goes, because the demand for all jobs are so high. He's like, the fact that there's 10.5 million unfilled jobs right now, which is a million less than it was a month prior. He's like, that's still such a large gap that this recession would have to be really, really deep for all of the demand lines to fall below the supply lines for all these industries. He's like, I think we're going to experience something. He goes, but I don't think, like you said, Kevin, is like, I don't think it's going to be as deep or as impactful as it was back then. He's like, I think we're going to maybe flatten out a little bit and decelerate, but then we'll climb out of it. And the prepared firms that have been selling and building relationships will climb out of it just fine. So I
Yeah,
think that
that's pretty insightful.
I think you're pretty. Yeah, I thought so too. I was like, wow, that's an amazing way to look at historic data. That's pretty good. So,
Yeah.
but awesome, man. So echogravity, really quick shout out. Tell me if there's someone out there listening, why should they reach out to you, and what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few firms in this space, and our play is more of a customized approach. We start with the the business goals. It's not all about the production style marketing. That's not kind of who we are. We take it from the perspective of what are you trying to be as a business, and where are you trying to go with this thing, and then marketing as a catalyst to help you get there. And so, if that's how you view marketing, if you're looking for someone to just throw some social posts out there and do some content, yeah, we can do that. But we like to be in a spot where we call it having a seat at the table, right? Like marketing, staffing firms are becoming more marketing organizations than sales organizations. And so,
Yeah.
we like to be in a spot where there's accountability to being a player in that journey. And so if that's, whether it's a $5 million staffing firm or 100 million, we can fit pretty well into that. And the best way to contact us would be echogravity.com, or contact me, Kevin, at echogravity.com. So, just figure it out, see if it's a good fit. And if it is, then see if we can work together.
Awesome. Well, I will certainly get all those links on the page here. So if anyone wants to get a hold of Kevin directly, you can just click the link and get right to him. I would encourage you to have a chat with him. He is, I think, one of the more transparent people that you're going to meet when it talks. He's never going to promise you blue sky and rainbows, which I come to appreciate. So if you want to have a kind of an honest assessment about your agency and where marketing can, improve it based on where things are going, I think it's a worthwhile conversation. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Kevin. But Kevin, thank you so much for being here, man. I'm grateful for your time and your wisdom, and of course, just the casual conversation.
Yeah, you do a fantastic job. Really, I appreciate being on here. It's been an honor.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. Thanks.